Nora made a living debunking haunted places. Then she found a forest where locals pressed old teeth into the trees before sunset. She thought the ritual was content until something outside her tent started clicking its mouth. Use headphones if you can, and keep the volume comfortable. I went camping where the locals leave teeth in the trees. I used to make videos about places people were afraid of. Not because I believed in any of it. I did not believe in ghosts, forest gods, cursed roads, haunted campgrounds, or old women who lived under bridges. I believed in bad lighting, old wood, local rumors, and people wanting their town to feel special. Fear was easier to film than truth. That was the line I used in interviews when I wanted to sound clever. The truth was simpler. Fear paid better. By the time I drove into Briar Glen, my channel had been falling for 6 months. Sponsors had started using words like pause and reassess. My producer, Ben, kept telling me the same thing in different ways. Softer episodes were dying. I needed something people would click on.
We need an image they understand in half a second.
He said that while I was still 40 minutes from the campground, with rain drying on the windshield and pine branches scraping the passenger side of my car.
Pointed forest is too broad. Teeth in trees, though. That is a thumbnail.
I laughed, because that was what I did when something made me uncomfortable. Then the road bent around a slope of black pines, and I saw the first tooth. It was wedged into the bark of a tree beside the campground sign, not carved, not painted, a real tooth, yellow at the root and pale at the edge, pressed deep into a vertical crack like someone had used their thumb until it stuck. The forest smelled wet and mineral, like rain sitting in stone. My camera light caught the enamel, and for 1 second it shone back at me like an eye. I remember my mouth going dry before I knew why that mattered. Briar Glen was not the kind of place that sold its legend. There were no stickers in the office window, no mugs, no laminated ghost tour map. Just a campground with 6 empty tent sites, a washroom building with a buzzing light, and an office that smelled like coffee, damp paper, and old wood. A family was loading their car when I parked. The mother had one hand over her youngest child's mouth, not hard, not cruel, just firm enough to keep him from whining while they crossed the tree line. The child did not fight her. He only watched the woods with wet eyes until the car doors shut. The woman behind the counter was named Ruth Collier. She was small, white-haired, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. When she saw the camera hanging from my hand, her face closed like a drawer.
You filming tonight?
I told her I was making a documentary about local protective rituals. That was not exactly a lie. I had learned to make mockery sound respectful until the edit.
Then film before dark and leave.
I smiled. I had permits. I had a satellite messenger. I had bear spray, extra batteries, a dash camera, a power bank, and a sleeping bag rated for weather colder than that mountain ever got in June. Ruth listened to that list like I was reading ingredients from a cereal box.
None of that matters if you answer it.
She reached under the counter and took out a matchbox. The cardboard had gone soft at the corners from being opened too many times. When she set it down, something small clicked inside.
Put it in a tree before dark, or keep your mouth shut until morning.
Inside was an old molar, clean, brown at the root, too ordinary to be theatrical.
Old baby teeth work, pulled teeth work, denture teeth work if they were worn long enough. Plastic does not.
She said that last part like people had tried it. That was the part that bothered me. Good horror towns perform. Ruth did not. She did not lower her voice. She did not tell me a legend. She gave me the tooth the way a ranger might hand over a map and remind me to bring water.
Perfect. Do not let her over-explain. Get the trees. Get the teeth. Get yourself laughing at it.
I should have hated that. Instead, I heard my last sponsor call in my head, and I put the matchbox in my jacket. Near my campsite, the trees were full of teeth. Not every tree, not evenly. They were placed in cracks and old knots, tucked under strips of bark, pressed into black sap. Some were tiny baby teeth. Some were gray molars. One was a gold-capped front tooth that caught the last light and made the tree look like it was smiling. I filmed all of it. I spoke to the camera in that bright, cruel voice I used when I wanted viewers to feel smarter than frightened people. Community dentistry as folklore. That was the line. I remember saying it twice because Ben liked clean takes.
Pull one out if you can. Not the fresh-looking ones. Something old. Show them it is just stuck in there.
My hand was already near the bark. I chose a small tooth tucked into a seam of dark sap. It resisted at first. Then it came free with a dry scrape that went straight through my jaw. The woods stopped. I know how that sounds, but if you have spent enough nights outside, you know forests are never silent. There is always something ticking, shifting, grinding its legs together, moving in leaves. This was different. This was a room going quiet because someone had walked in. Even Ben heard it through the phone. He stopped talking for half a second, and in that gap I heard the faintest sound from the trees. Not a growl, not a footstep, a small patient click, as if something had noticed an empty space in its mouth. The tooth sat warm in my palm.
That is the shot. Put it in your pocket and move on.
So I did. I did not put Ruth's tooth into a tree before dark. I told myself I wanted to preserve the ritual object for the episode. I told myself the real story was how belief turns ordinary things into boundaries. I told myself anything except the truth, which was that I did not want to look foolish on camera. After sunset, the campground emptied of normal sound. I sat in my tent with the camera pointed at the zippered door. My sleeping pad had gone cold under my hip. The little red battery light blinked against the fabric. Every few minutes, rainwater fell from a branch and tapped the fly sheet. I tried to make it an episode in my head. I described the temperature. I checked the audio levels. I whispered possible narration lines into a second recorder and deleted them because they sounded too nervous. The old tooth I had stolen sat in a plastic evidence sleeve beside my boot, and the sleeve kept crinkling though no air moved inside the tent. Then something clicked in the trees. Once, twice, like two teeth being tapped together in the dark. I turned the camera toward the sound. The microphone picked up my breathing first, then the rain, then that small hard click again. It came from the left side of the tent. A few seconds later, it came from the right. No footsteps moved between those places. I whispered Ruth's warning under my breath, not because I believed it, but because my mouth remembered the words before I did.
put it in a tree before dark, or keep your mouth shut until morning.
The tent wall dimpled inward beside my shoulder. Not wind, breath.
Are you cold in there?
My mouth opened before thought caught up. One tiny polite answer rose in my throat. No, I am fine. I bit it shut so hard my teeth clicked back. Outside something clicked with me. I lost mine. The voice was a child. A little girl, maybe. But the words came out crowded, as if they had to squeeze around a mouthful of stones.
Can I have yours?
I left the tent because staying inside suddenly felt worse than going out. I took the camera, the flashlight, and Ruth's Matchbox. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Ben calling again, the vibration loud against the metal leg of the tripod. I did not answer. The campground looked too flat under the flashlight. Gravel, empty fire rings, dark picnic tables slick with rain. The washroom building stood maybe 30 yards away, its security light buzzing like a trapped insect.
The road is this way.
The voice came from the trees behind me.
Please help me.
That came from the washroom. I ran toward the light because human beings are stupid about light. We think it means safety, even when every other part of us knows better. The washroom door was locked. I grabbed the handle, shook it once, and heard the clicking above me. She was crouched on the roof. I say she because that was the shape my brain reached for. Woman, mother, human. None of those words fit. Her arms were too long and folded backward against the shingles. Her knees rose beside her shoulders. Her skin was the color of wet flour. Her lips were thin and dark, stretched around a mouth so full of teeth that for a second I could not understand it as a mouth at all. Baby teeth, gold teeth, broken teeth, denture teeth wired into gums, gray molars packed behind white incisors, rows that did not belong to the same skull. The voices stopped when my flashlight hit her face. Her mouth did not close. That was the worst detail. It rested open, packed full, every tooth touching another tooth that should never have been beside it. Some of them trembled like they still remembered separate people. Then her jaw clicked sideways. I do not remember deciding to run. I remember gravel slipping under my shoes. I remember the camera banging against my ribs. I remember blood in my mouth because I had bitten the side of my tongue and still refused to open my jaw. I made it back to the tent and zipped myself inside with hands that barely worked. I thought, stupidly, that nylon could be a wall. I thought, if I can just stay quiet until morning. My phone buzzed again.
Nora? I can see your last upload file. Did you get the sound?
I stared at the screen. His name glowed in my hand, bright and normal and impossible to answer.
Talk to me.
Something outside the tent used his voice a second later.
Talk to me.
The real call dropped. The tent wall pressed inward again. A wet mouth found the fabric near my face. I could hear breath moving through too many teeth. It was inches away. Nylon was all that separated my face from that crowded mouth. The pressure moved along the wall slowly, tasting the shape of me through the fabric, stopping whenever my breathing stuttered.
Open your mouth.
A white point pushed through the nylon, not a knife, a tooth. It dragged downward, slow and careful, cutting the wall of the tent with a tiny ripping sound. That was when Ruth's warning finally stopped sounding like superstition and became instructions. Leave a tooth before dark, or keep your mouth shut until morning. I had not left one, so I had one job left. Do not open my mouth. I grabbed the matchbox and ran through the torn side of the tent. I do not know how long the run lasted. It could not have been more than a few minutes. It felt like the whole night had been folded into the space between my teeth. The marked trees were near the campground entrance. I had filmed them in daylight. I knew where they were. The monster knew I knew.
Nora, office is open.
Ruth's voice came from the right. The office was left.
The car is unlocked. Keep moving.
Ben's voice came from ahead of me, low between the trees, where there was no signal and no road.
Please, it hurts.
That one almost got me. I had built my whole life on exposing fear as a trick, but a child's voice in the dark still reached for the oldest part of me. My mouth pulled open around a gasp. I clamped it shut so hard, another line of blood ran under my tongue. The tooth mother dropped from a tree ahead of me. She landed on all fours without a sound, her head tilted. Teeth clicked in her mouth one after another, not randomly, but like a crowd deciding who would speak next.
Just one word.
I stepped backward and felt bark against my shoulder. The marked tree. I shook the matchbox open. The old molar fell into my palm. My fingers were slick with rain and blood. The tooth slipped once, bounced against a root, and I caught it with both hands before it vanished into the leaves. The tooth mother's breath touched the back of my neck. It smelled like old coins, wet stone, and something sweet that had been sealed too long.
Tell me where to put it.
I found a crack in the bark and pushed the tooth in with my thumb. It did not fit at first. Then the bark softened around it like gum around a root. Every voice stopped. Dawn was not dramatic. No fire, no scream, no monster dissolving into light. The black between the trees thinned into gray, and the tooth mother backed away one joint at a time, her mouth still moving without sound. Ruth found me sitting beside the campground sign after sunrise. I had not spoken for so long that when I tried, my jaw shook.
You took one, didn't you?
I nodded.
Then check your pockets before you leave.
The tooth I had pulled from the tree was back in my jacket, warm, dry, clicking softly against the cardboard of the empty matchbox, even though nothing in my hand was moving.
It took the offering. That does not mean it forgave the theft.
I wanted to ask what that meant. Ruth looked at my mouth before I could speak, and I kept the question behind my teeth. I never published the episode. I told Ben the footage corrupted. That was partly true. The camera had sound. It had the clicking. It had voices. But every frame where she should have appeared was blown white, as if the censor had tried to stare into a mouthful of flashbulbs. 3 days later, one of my back molars felt loose. I went to a dentist because I wanted a human explanation. Infection, stress grinding, a cracked filling from biting my tongue all night. Anything small enough to fix.
Have you had dental surgery recently?
I told him no.
Floki Tamra. Then I need you to look at this.
The X-ray monitor glowed blue-white in the corner of the room. Behind my lower teeth, under the gum, was a second row of roots. Not mine. They were different sizes, different shapes. One narrow, like a child's front tooth. One broad and flat. One root split wrong, like it had belonged to someone much older. My tongue found a hard ridge behind my molar while he was still talking. A new point under the skin, waiting. I do not make debunking videos anymore. I still have the matchbox. I still have the tooth I stole. Some nights, when the house is quiet, it clicks once from inside my desk drawer, and my jaw aches until morning. If you ever find teeth pressed into a tree, do not touch them. And if something in the dark asks you to answer, keep your mouth closed until morning.